I think we're ready. Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at how you can change firmware, maybe completely change to a wholly new firmware, or just modify what's already on, well, modify the version of what's already on there to add a sensor or to add some special feature you want. So we're going to do that. It's all the same process. Basically, you do create a new firmware installation every time. You can't, with these setups the way they are, you don't kind of go in and edit the firmware on the computer. You compile it on the printer. You compile it on your computer and then upload a whole new batch of it to your printer. There is, let me look in our little list here. Yeah, down here, what I've got on class 16, Clipper. Clipper does let you dynamically change firmware options. So it's not changing the whole firmware, but it's changing a configuration file. We'll get to that. The problem with it currently is that you need some kind of single board computer like a Raspberry Pi, which are, I assume, still almost impossible to get. So unless you already have one, Clipper is going to be tough to install right now, just because you're going to have to find something that's not quite the normal. Well, let's just look. Let's just see if Raspberry Pis are available these days. None of these are even Raspberry Pis. These are all boxes and accessories, cooling. Yeah, so they don't even show Raspberry Pis you can actually buy right now. There's a 02. Oh, but it doesn't have like a price. Oh, yeah, here's one. This should not cost $130 for this. So yeah, they're still in short supply right now. So that'll be the problem for later on when we get to Clipper, if you don't have one. But outside of that, when you create a change in your firmware, or you want to change something, then you basically compile a completely new firmware and upload that one to your printer. So that's what we're going to do today. Also, in part of that is I've got the CR Touch. Let's look over here. Got the CR Touch. So this printer already has a BL Touch on it, just from a previous thing I did. We're going to assume it doesn't have anything on it, and we're going to put the CR Touch. The CR Touch is the Creality version of the BL Touch. The BL Touch was, I think, the first good mechanical, like mass manufactured mechanical switch sensor for sensing your bed. There were others, like people would go in and actually fabricate switches, like little, like these switches, and create those in a little fixture and probe the bed with that. The whole point of this is that you're going to be probing the surface of the bed so that you can figure out where the bed is. And if you don't have some sensor like this, then you probably have a limit switch like this one over here that kind of just the whole gantry moves down and triggers that, and that just sets where your z = 0 coordinate is. But here you can probe wherever you want to. And so currently this printer is set up to where it just probes in the middle to find the bed height and assumes the bed is flat from there. But if you have a really large bed, or maybe you just want to deal with a few waves in your bed or something like that, then what you can do with this, or a sensor like this, there are others that aren't this kind with the little probe tip. There are others that do a inductive, capacitive, there's other types of sensors out there. I like the mechanical ones. They are less susceptible to other things, like temperature can affect some of these sensors. Humidity can affect some of these sensors. And the mechanical one is pretty repeatable. So I like the mechanical ones. Plus, these are actually usually on the cheaper side. This is, let's look at this. Here they are. So you can get the whole kit with mounting brackets, cable, the sensor itself for $40. So that's not crazy expensive. I don't know why they have 3 of them here. They're all the same. Here's one that has a couple extra nozzles in it, just thrown in for the same price. So you could also get some nozzles. That's the same kit again. A lot of these are just the same kit over and over again. Actually, this one comes with a capstan for your uh, feeder motor. It is not the one that's geared. It is the one that's metal. It's the one that was on the printer when we started, when we looked at it. Got some extra nozzles. You've got some extra fittings, stiffer bed springs. This is actually kind of a nice kit. It does a little bit of everything. It's got this Capricorn tubing. So this blue tubing would replace, well, you can barely see it on there, replace the Teflon tubing here. The blue, well, let's see. Yeah, it does say it's Capricorn. So it's still Teflon. The difference is that, and I have not verified, like gone and measured all this, but the purported difference is that the Capricorn tubing has a tighter control over the inner diameter. So what that would do for you, if that's true, is that your filament runs through here, and if there is let's just imagine there's a really large diameter, inner diameter for this tube, then your filament can kind of bunch up in there. And so when you, when you do retractions or anything like that, or you're even trying to feed filament into this large diameter tube, then it's going to have a lot of slop in it. And so you have less control over retractions and just flow in general. The Capricorn tubing, supposedly, and again, I should probably at some point cut up a bunch of it and actually verify that it does have a tighter diameter control, inner diameter, than regular whatever this tubing is. I've never actually tested that. But the idea would be you'd have better control over the filament being fed into the printer. So this, I've never bought this kit, but this is actually kind of a lot of the simple upgrades. The CR Touch does require firmware changes, but these others don't. And that's only $45. Actually, it's on sale right now. I don't know if that's its regular price or not, but that's not bad at all. Not bad at all. That doesn't have the touch sensor in it though. All right, so, and we'll get to this stuff later where changing out the entire board. Obviously that would need a firmware change too. So first of all, we have to figure out what board we have on our printer. So if you don't know what board you have, then you have to go in here and you got to look at it. So we've got to take this guy off. And I don't know what board's on this printer because I don't think I've ever changed the board on this printer. But I couldn't tell you what board's in there. So we're going to look and see. Get that guy out of the way. And there's a screw way back in the back, so we got to pull the bed forward and get that one out so that we can see what's in there. Okay, now depending on your printer setup, this fan may be on top and it is plugged into the board, so you don't want to just yank this cover off because there's going to be a wire. So yeah, that wire right there. All right, so let's get down in there and see what we can find out. So under this cable, there we go, there's Creality. Oh, all right, so if we zoom in on that, Creality 4.2.2 board. And so all of the boards will have some kind of name and version number. So this is not the most recent Creality board. This is a little bit older one. We already knew just by listening to the way the stepper motors acted that it was not a silent board. Once we change the boards out, we'll talk about what all this stuff on the board actually does. Right now, we just need to know what kind of board. So we have Creality and what version, 4.2.2. So we can kind of put this back. We don't need to be in there right now. Oh, well, we will need to be in there for our CR Touch changing. Why don't we work on that since we got the cover open? So normally, you wouldn't already have something here. This is a 3D printed bracket. Our kit, I assume, is going to have a bracket in it. We'll look at that once we get this old one off. So even if you don't have something already here, most of the sensors mount into this screw hole and one that's up under there. We'll have to get to it somehow. Can I even see it? Maybe. That's got a Phillips on it, which I do have one here. All right. So I'm going to take the sensor off right now and kind of get some room in here. So what you would do if you're replacing or if you're adding a sensor from scratch is you'd still take these two screws out. Just there wouldn't be a bracket here already. Basically, they hold this cover on. So, for this particular printer, this size bed is probably the largest bed that you don't actually need one of these sensors on. It is handy. I will say that it's handy because you don't, if you change stuff or whatever, you don't have to rely on this Z switch, limit switch over here, being able to adjust. So you don't have to worry about that. So it is nice to not have to worry about that. But as far as the bed being all out of shape, I don't know that I'll use the mesh bed leveling stuff. That's where you go probe the bed a bunch of spots and create a topographic map of the bed. And then as you're printing, that map is used to move your nozzle up and down across the waves of your bed. That's probably a little unnecessary for a bed this size. But there are certainly printers that have much larger beds that's almost mandatory. Just because it's hard to keep a large piece of metal flat enough to print on all the way across it. But I do like that I don't really have to worry about the Z end stop adjusting that all the time. I can put, so what that does is you might want to print on one of these surfaces, something like this magnetic bed. Other times you might want to print on a piece of glass, like a picture frame glass. Other times you might want to print on a specialty piece of glass. Or you might have all these bed surfaces and they're different thicknesses. So it would be very rare that you would find all your beds the same thickness. So if you're changing out this bed surface and they're different thicknesses and you don't have a probe, then you're going to have to always adjust the Z height on your printer, and that's going to be annoying. So even if you don't use the probe for anything other than figuring out the top surface of the bed, not necessarily the mesh of it, but just where it's at, that if you are changing these beds all the time for particular reasons, you've got some materials that print on glass better, or maybe you want different textures on the bottom of your print or whatever, then this little sensor or one like it will greatly speed up that process of just throwing a bed on there and letting it print. Because all this thing will do is, no matter what thickness the bed is, it's going to go find it and print from that point. So that's a big benefit on these smaller beds. Let's see. So this is what you would normally have. And, oh, there it is. No, where did that, I dropped one of these little guys that were holding this guy on, and I don't know where it went. I wonder if it went down in here somewhere. That would be kind of bad. Hopefully we'll, oh, I think, no, I don't see it. I may have to go back and watch the video and see where that thing landed, because I wasn't paying attention. It's not that I necessarily need it, it's that I don't want it in something that is going to create problems later. So I do want to find where it went at some point. All right, so you get to this point. And again, this is probably not here. So this is also, if you ever need to do any work on your hot end, there it is in there. We'll deal with that later. We've got some parts where we're going to change this whole thing out at some point. But for now, we'll leave that alone. Let's open up this guy and see what we have in here. I haven't ever opened it. So let's see what we have. Oh, it's a little magnetic box. That's kind of neat. All right. So we do have instructions. There's our bracket. Actually, there's several brackets in here, I guess, depending on what kind of printer you're trying to attach it to. This is the one that we'll use. It's basically, this is the printed version of, this is a metal bracket that came with the kit. This is just one I printed at some point. And so we've got this. Here's our actual sensor. So I do have a cable system already routed in there. I don't know. I assume these probably use the same pinouts because this is the CR Touch, and anytime you're installing it, typically the firmware you're going to use is going to refer to the BL Touch, which is the one that I had on there before. And it's not a clone of it, but they work exactly the same way. This one actually has a little bit nicer features. You can even feel that it's actually quite a bit heavier. But the probe on this is a metal probe, I think it's metal. It's either metal or metallized, but I think it's actual metal probe. The probe on this guy's a little plastic probe. Oh wow, where's my screen? Can't get him on, it won't reach over there. It's only a little cable. So this little probe's a plastic one. This one's actually a metal one. And I think the sensor inside is different. I'm not certain. I think this one might use a Hall effect sensor. Actually, it's too hard to see inside there. They might both use Hall effect sensors. Anyway, we're going to put this one on there. And we're going to use this bracket. Let's see what else is in our box, just so we know. Another couple of brackets for different mounting options. Here we do have, oh, this is a little slightly bit different here. Oh, we got some zip ties. Oh, and I was wondering, they do give us some hardware for mounting, although a lot of times I just use what I already had. Okay. So here's where your first little option would come in. So this is the cable that goes with the CR Touch. It is a little bit different than the cable that I have with the BL Touch that was already on there. So we will use this cable. So what the difference is we've got to look down in the board box over here. So let's look down here. So the BL Touch has this 3 set of wires and this pair of wires. So the black and white wire are just acting, I think those are where it's acting like an end stop. So it's just like one of the little trigger switches over here. Just like one of those things. The other, power, ground, and signal. So like controlling the BL Touch. So these 3. I've got the same setup over here. Let me unwind it here because it's all bound up. Can't get it to come loose. All right, there we go. So I've got the same setup where they're in one ribbon. These were in 2 separate ribbons, but we got the same. Probably they would. I don't know if they would plug in. I actually don't think they're compatible. But I've got the black and white, so that's the end stop, and then I've got red, blue, and yellow for the power, ground, and signal wires for the controlling the BL Touch. But the real difference is on this end. So this end, I've got them all bound into one plug. And this one, this BL Touch, I've got down in here. We're going to have to zoom in. Okay. See if we can get that to focus better. Okay. I have got this little set of wires that looks like I might have glued in there, maybe? There might be some hot glue on there. I think it is. I might have hot glued them in there because they're kind of individual. And then I've got this set. So they're split off where the black and white are running over to the end stop where the Z end stop, the one the physical switch would have plugged in. And these are split out. I did have them hot glued in there. These are split out where they will go to the relevant pins on this little header right here. So assuming your board, which most of the modern-ish boards have, assuming your board has this little socket, now everything can just plug straight into there, hopefully, like so. Although that's going to rearrange them differently than how those were. That could be interesting. we might have an issue. I don't know. We'll see. I'm looking at the label. Actually, it's probably easier to look at the labels on the screen. Let's see. The labels are GV, in, G, and out. So let's see. It looks like it's going to line up with, yeah, this way. So G being the white wire, V being the black wire, N is yellow. That actually makes sense. Blue and red is out. We'll plug it in and see. That seems like they're not, I don't know, we'll see. But it's going to plug in right there. And then we'll route it. I won't worry too much with routing it right now because it needs to go like up under there and out the frame. We'll just get it to kind of connect right now and work, hopefully. So let's unplug this guy. And there's nothing wrong with this BL Touch, so I'm going to keep it, and maybe I'll even put it back in the CR Touch box so that we can hold on to it, because there's nothing at all wrong with it. And if I can't get it to work with this board, which it should work with this board, but if I can't, then we can plug it back in. All right. So over here, what we have to do is, I guess we could look at the instructions and see what they want us to do. But what I'm going to do is, let's see, we've got all this. It does show connecting our, oops. There we go. It shows connecting our cable in that orientation to the main board. Notice this says 32-bit. 32-bit refers to the processor on this board. The original ones were 8-bit processors, so they were a good bit slower. The new boards, all of these version 4 boards and up, and most printers shipping now have 32-bit boards. So that's just a processing power thing. It lets the boards do a little bit more processing, some routines that weren't able to be done on the 8-bit board. Let's see, I've got some stuff here. Here they're talking about how do you actually make it. Just plugging it in will power it, and it might even on its own act as the Z stop, maybe. But the firmware is not going to really know that you have a BL Touch installed, or a CR Touch installed. Either one, it won't know. Unless in our case we already had one installed, so it doesn't think there's one there. But assuming you didn't have one, then the firmware doesn't know it's there. So they're kind of going through how to set that up here. They're showing plug the cable in first, mount it to the bracket, and then mount the bracket to the carriage, which is what I was planning on doing. All right, so let's kind of straighten out our cable because it looks like it's all tangled up. All right, so we're going to straighten out our cable. Now this is a nice feature, is that it plugs in on top, so it's easier to get to. The BL Touch kind of plugs in on the side further down here, makes it a little harder to get to. These plugs should only fit one way. I'm trying to figure out what that direction is. It's hard to tell. Well, let's look at the picture and see. It's also hard to tell because there's not a distinguishing feature on this guy. But it looks, and the wires colors here aren't even in the same order as they are in our picture. So they've got blue on the outside and we've got red on the outside. So who knows? But they kind of show, I think that's this way and like this. That, I don't know. That doesn't seem right. They could be, but that doesn't seem like it goes at all. So I think it does have to go this way. Okay, there it went in there. All right, so we plugged that guy in. Now we're going to mount it to our bracket. So we kind of have to make sure that our wires clear, and it looks like we might have a little notch in our bracket, a little notch there that's going to go around there. We've got screw threads in here, so it looks like we're going to screw from the bottom into the bracket, and I will use the screws that they provide. So this little set, assuming I don't lose them. Okay, I'm also going to zoom out a little bit because I'm having trouble staying in the screen. All right, so we're going to mount this guy this way. It's hard to do with holding all this stuff and putting it together at one time, but I think we can do it. So there, there, we can get the first guy going. And then we'll get this one. Whenever you're tightening or assembling something that has more than one screw, don't tighten the first one down until you've got all of them at least installed, then go around tightening them. That will save you a lot of trouble. Alignment issues. All right, this one is having issues with getting started. There it goes. So I am having to apply a good, I want to loosen this one up in fact, because it seems like it's binding. I'm having to apply a good bit of, actually a little too much, what I think is too much force to get this guy to thread in there. What it makes me think is they cut these threads and then they powder coated this, and they got powder coat in the threads because it's not really cooperating. The solution would be to go find the little tap and recut the threads in this metal bracket. Probably most people, and I don't even know if I assume I have that tap somewhere, but finding that would be a challenge. I don't want to snap this screw off in here though, and have to try and extract that. So be aware that it might take a decent amount of force to force this screw into some of these threads because they are not clean. We are making it though. There we go. And once it worked its way through there, it kind of loosened up, but it's still pretty tight. Tighter than it should be. All right, and I don't like that the screw threads poke up through there, but that's the only way it's going to actually attach, so we got to do it that way. Now, they gave us some screws to mount it to this guy, so we'll use those. You can use the ones that you took out of there, but they're going to be slightly short, right? Because now you've got to go through this extra bracket. Hopefully these, yeah, that's much easier. Now this one's another challenging one. But we did that pretty easy. All right. So get that. So now we've got it plugged in, and it is there. It's plugged into both ends of the board, to the board and to the CR Touch. So I'm just going to leave it like that for now, and I will route it cleaner at some other point. Now, if you are leaving it like this, then be sure if your printer is going to be moving around that this is not going to get caught and yank on something. But we're just going to keep this out of the way for now, and then later on I will route it. It goes underneath here. There's a little notch cut out, and it'll come out the back, and we can route it. You can kind of see, I'll just zip tie it to the existing loom there. I'm not going to try and put it inside that loom. That would be nice, but that's more than I want to deal with. All right. So this actually probably would work at this point because I already had a BO Touch on there. But what you would need to do next is go over to your computer. So let's go over here. And you have to pick what firmware. Now, it did in its instructions, they're super tiny, so it's hard to read. But they have a firmware that you can download at Creality.com. So we could do that. We could just go grab Creality.com, and why don't we look at that just to see what they have, because that would be the, if it worked, that would be the simplest thing. So let's see. I have not ever done that before. Creality.com/download. Well, let's just go there. I don't know. So let's see. Probably support software download center. Let's see. We're in the Ender 3. Now this is just the Ender 3. Ender 3. That's what we've got. All right. So there is Ender 3 BO Touch without adapter board plus filament detection. I don't have a filament sensor on here. Ender 3, Marlin 2, CR Touch, or BO Touch. That's probably the one I would need. So I could possibly just download this file, and it's going to be a pre-compiled version of firmware that I can put on an SD card. Where are we at? SD card. Put it on here. Put the SD card back into the printer. Turn the printer on, and it would load that firmware up, and it should work. Maybe we could try that. I've never actually done that, but we could try it. A downside to using the pre-compiled firmware like this, and look, the last time it was updated was August 2021. So it's been a year since this was updated. So yeah, maybe stuff has changed in a year or not. I don't know. But I would want Ender 3 because my printer's an Ender 3. Marlin 2. Look, there's probably some, yeah, here's some older boards back here, some of the 8-bit boards. They can't run the Marlin 2. Marlin is the type of firmware that most of these printers use. And there's a 1.0 version, 1. And it's a bunch of different decimals after it, version that mainly is going to be found on the older 8-bit boards. And then there's a 2.0 bunch of numbers that's going to be found on the 32-bit boards. And this one is for adding, but nothing else, just keeping everything else stock, but adding a CR Touch or a BO Touch. So I should be able to download this. We'll download it. You gave me this little file down here. We'll put that on our desktop and extract it. And look, see what's in there. Let's see, where did it? I've got to go hunt it down somewhere. There it is. All right, so let's look at this. So here's what's in there. This guy, Ender 3. All right, so that is the firmware. I'll try putting it on there and see what happens. So all you do with this is you take your little SD card you normally use in your printer, or one like it, and put it on your computer. There's the files, those are all just printing files. And we just take this guy and put it over here. We probably don't have to rename it. Let's see. See if we have to rename it. Nope. So should be that now we eject. It's always good for these little SD cards. They're always in and out of printers and computers. It is almost imperative that you eject them, at least on the computer side. You can't really eject them on the printer side, but they get corrupted so easily not ejecting them. So we did that. Now we're back over at our printer. we're just going to put this guy in here. We've got everything connected. And nothing looks like it's going to like catch on anything, and we'll turn it on. So it did its little power on routine, but we knew it would do that just because it's got power. That just means that we've connected it to power. So that's good. The screen over here is blue. That's also good, meaning that it is loading firmware. And there's the new firmware. I don't know if you can see it. It did. Yeah, it put the new firmware on there. Let's give it a little test run. It's still doing its boot up routine. So now I've got a new screen over here that's that firmware. Let's just test to home in Z. So I'm going to do motion. Actually, I'll just auto home. So I'm kind of holding this wire out of the way because it's very precarious. So we didn't get it to home. Let's try that again. I'm not sure why everything's moving, so I'll boot it up again and give it another shot. I did grab the one that said, yeah, it says BL Touch. And this is plugged into the board. Yeah, okay. Probably shouldn't be digging around in there while you're got it on. Let's just move. Ah, something is weird with that. Okay. So, like, there's some weird... And this is why I don't like doing the pre-built stuff, because I don't know what's in this firmware. It's just there. And something is not right. This printer printed fine all yesterday. I printed this this little puzzle box from Printables the other day, or finished printing it. Printed fine, and now we can't move our axes. So let's do this the way I would normally do it and see if that fixes it. Because it could be something with the firmware, or it could be something with the way I've got something wired with the BL Touch. But something's acting kind of strange because it's not actually binding anywhere. All this moves fine, but something's certainly not acting right. All right. So here's what I would normally do. I don't normally go and grab these from Creality, just because, you know, it's a year old and I don't know what board. You know, this could be for, it doesn't say what board. This could be for the 4.2.7 board, and I've got the 4.2.2 board. So I don't know, because it doesn't tell me, and I can't look at the firmware. So what I would normally do is I would go to, let me show you what I'm looking at here. I would go to search for TH3D UFW. So TH3D, they're a company. TH3D Studio is a company that compiles firmware. That's not their business. Their business is they sell things like sensors and bed kits, and they sell printer parts and accessories and printers. But they also have UFW, which is Unified Firmware, which is, they typically support this pretty regularly and keep it going. They use it so that if you buy some of their products, that they know that their products are going to work with that firmware, and it's going to be easy to set up. But the firmware is free, so you can use it for other things too. So I usually type TH3D UFW, and it takes me to this link. And the unified firmware, it means that they try to get all of the printers out on the market, all the printer boards out on the market. They're all built into one unified firmware experience. And by selecting certain options, you narrow down to, oh, I have an Ender 3 with a 4.2.2 board, and I want to add a BL Touch. So first we've got to find, you know, we're in ANETs right now, so that's not our printer. So we've got to find the Creality stuff. So I'm just scrolling through the page. There's some Creality, but they're CR10s. Okay. Ender 2, Those are good printers, by the way. They're small, the Ender 2, but they're actually pretty nice. Ender 3 Max, that's not what I have. I don't have a S1. I don't have a Pro. I don't have a V2. I've got this guy, Ender 3 R3 Pro, but that's the Melzi board. We just looked inside there, and I had a Creality 4.2.2 board. So there's a SKR. That's actually what we're going to put in this later. I don't know if it's a version 2 or 3 yet. I haven't even opened it up. So let's go to the next page. There's a 4.2.x, but that's for the version 2. Here's what I want. Creality Ender 3, that's our printer. I have the 4.2.2 board, and they've got it set up where if you have any of the 4.2 boards, this is what you want. I don't have to worry about the precompiled version for BL Touch or whatever. This one thing has all of those options in there. The problem is it is a bunch of code. It's a big wall of code stuff. So they have gone through and made it as simple as it can be, other than precompiled, to get the options you want. So you download it. I've already downloaded. Well, I don't know. I assume let's download it. I don't know if I've recently. That's not. That's buying. That's buying the board itself. I want to download the firmware. Here we go. Download that. All right. So it came up down here. We're going to drop once it finishes. Come on. We're going to put it on the desktop and extract it once it finishes. Here are the CPUs that are supported with this download. You could probably read on that little thing and get the right one. There we go. All right, so that goes there on the desktop. I just drag it to the desktop, extract files, extract it to this folder. That looks good. All right. So it's extracting. And it's done. All right, so now I've got a folder on my desktop. I guess I can show you that. Well, it's over here. And inside that folder is this stuff. Now this one does have LCD firmware. I've just got the regular old plain LCD. Some of these printers have LCDs that are touchscreens, and they actually run their own firmware on the LCD. Mine does not have that, so that's not useful to me. But I've got this firmware folder. That's what I want. All right. Now, the other thing I like about this is that if you've never messed with a lot of code, it can look really intimidating on what you actually have to do to compile this stuff. But they've got a pretty, like, pictures, click here kind of thing for setting all this up. One of the things you have to set up is you have to set up VS Code, this 1.a. That is Visual Studio Code. So it's like you're writing code now. It's already written, and you just have to do a few little edits, but this is a code editor. So you do have to get that set up, and they've got a link. This is a link that is pretty good step by step, and they keep it up to date. So you do have to do that. I've already done that. So follow this. If you've never set up VS Code, follow this just step by step. It's a lot of these kind of things where it's very, very clear what you do. Download the firmware. That's what we just did. Extract the files. We actually did that already. Open the folder labeled firmware. So we got to go to VS Code. So let's see. Do I already have it open? There it is. All right. So this is what it looks like. Mine just apparently updated to version 1.67. We don't need that. And we want to open that folder. So file, open folder, not a file. We're going to open an entire folder. And we've got to find our desktop TH3D Unified 2 Creality V4X. So open that. And then open the one called firmware. And we don't need to open any of these. There's that Marlin folder. Marlin's the name. Even this firmware, even though it's TH3D, it's still Marlin. It's just their spin on it. So we're going to select that folder. And it's going to open a whole bunch of stuff over here. This is our kind of file tree. Sometimes down in this bottom here we go down here. You'll see it doing things in the background, downloading plugins and updating and all that kind of stuff. Just let it do what it's going to do. Sometimes over in this right corner, you'll get some pop-ups. I usually ignore those, like I don't install those. So we go to this Marlin folder. Marlin is where the firmware is. And then these with the little C in front of them, those are code that we can actually edit. See, it decided it needed to open something over here. This is part of when you do the setup VS Code, it's going to install this platform EO type thing. It tells you how to do all that. So what I want to do though is I want to go to configuration.h. So there's configuration advanced, backend, speed, all that kind of stuff. I just want the one that's just .h. And I want to edit this code. All right. So if you forget what to do, they actually tell you in the comments of this code what to do. I don't know that I can make this larger. Let's see if I have a way to make like a preferences thing to make the font size larger. I'm sure I do somewhere. I've just never gone and done that. Let's just see if it's in here. Oh, it might be in here, but it's, wow. Font size. Let's just make the font size bigger for now. See if that helped us out. All right, so yeah, you can see that a little better. Over on this right hand, this is the code. Like it kind of shows you where you're at in the code. So what we want to do is we want to find the board of all of these. Remember, this one unified piece of firmware covers a lot of Ender 3 printers. So I've got to find Ender 3 version 4.2.2 board, not the Max, not the V2. Not an Ender 5, not a 427 board. You know, so all these others, I don't want any of those. This is the one that I have. So you have to find the one that matches your printer board. You go look on your printer board and see what's written on there. And your printer board may not say Max or V2. So you do have to know if you have a Ender Max, Ender V2, something like that. But it'll tell you the version of the board. So mine's actually the first one. So to tell the firmware that that's the board I have, I just take these two forward slashes and erase them. And you'll see that it changes color, saying that it's active. All these others are just comments. All these forward slashes mean that this is just a comment that is ignored by the compiler. So now I've got it set up that I am using an Ender 3 version 4.2.2 board. It doesn't know that I want to install this BO Touch or this CR Touch. So keep scrolling. There's more boards, 431. I haven't even seen that one before. Filament sensor. I don't have a filament sensor. These are basically, as the filament is used up, they will tell you if you run out of filament and they'll pause the print. I don't have one of those on this printer. Easyable probe mounts. So probe being the CR Touch or the BL Touch. If you have a stock setup, which, let's see if our little instructions, well, see, our instructions don't tell us to do it this way. Our instructions tell us to just go grab their precompiled stuff. So I am sure I could search around somewhere on the internet and find which one of these, oh, nope, that didn't help. I could probably find which one. We're going to do it a different way, but I could probably find what this is we mounted this CR Touch with that bracket, and so the CR Touch is some distance away from where the actual nozzle is. And so if I happen to have one of these probes, which, you know, I might have, it might be that one, but I don't know. I could do the same thing where I, whoops, didn't want to do that. I could uncomment. I've got the OEM bracket for the Ender 3, and it knows now where the CR Touch is in relation to the nozzle because it needs to know that distance between there. I don't know that that's what this bracket is or not, but they have this one that's custom probe. So you can just you can measure and put in the numbers So we're going to do that one because I don't know. It's probably this, but I don't know that. LCD. So if you converted your Ender 3 version 2 LCD, blah, blah, blah. I didn't do any of that stuff. I don't have an Ender 5, so I can ignore all of that. NeoPixels, those are little LED, individually addressable LEDs. I don't have any of that. EasyAble. So EasyAble is TH3D's product that is bed sensor. So they use these EasyAble points and probe edge and fast probe. They use that for any of the sensors like the CR Touch. So what this is this 3 means that it's going to do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's going to probe 9 times on the bed. So obviously the more points you add, the longer it's going to take to do the little mesh data collection, but you'll get a better mesh. 3 is probably, I don't believe my bed is warped at all. It hasn't acted like it's warped. It's printed. I've printed on most all of the bed and it's printed fine. So I don't think I need a very dense mesh here. So I'm going to leave this at 3 points just to do the 9 thing. So it'll kind of, if the bed got tilted somehow, it'll pick that up and that'll help adjust for like the whole bed just tilted for some reason. Or maybe the gantry, you know, this little piece, maybe it got tilted. So it'll pick up that. And I think the bed itself is actually pretty flat. So 3 is probably fine. There is a limit on what this can be. I don't remember what that limit is. Use odd numbers. Total points is okay. Yeah. I don't know what the limit is on what the biggest number you can put in here. There is a limit. This 35 is how close to the bed do you want to get to the edges. 35 is fine. Fast probe, you can do a slow probe, fast probe, super fast is off. And so you can just kind of speed up the process. I don't think we need that because we're only doing 3 points anyway. Heaters on during probing. It may reduce the accuracy. Generally, though, you want to have the bed heated when you're probing its shape because it's going to change shape some amount when you heat it because it's at the bottom of it, it's a piece of aluminum. You heat that up, it's going to deform some amount. But they have it off by default and they say do not use unless told by support. I'm going to leave it off because, again, my bed is pretty flat anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. If you were having issues like you probe the thing and it still never kind of works, you might want to probe it while the bed is heated up. There's even slower wounds if you want to even have slower, more accurate. This is the section where they're kind of showing a picture here of the nozzle and using it as the origin to figure out where your probe is located. So this nozzle to probe offset, this is definitely not where my probe is located because 1010 would be 10 millimeters to the right and 10 millimeters behind the nozzle. And if we look at mine is definitely to the left and it's almost in line. So I'm going to do this kind of rough with eyeballing some calipers. I may have to get it where I can see it better. Okay, and I'm just going to see if I can measure the distance. A better way to do this is actually to put you a sheet of paper down and actually move your nozzle to the center and then manually drive your probe over to the center and you can see the numbers change on your screen. I can't actually drive it right now because the firmware that's on there won't let me move. So we're going to just do this kind of thing. So let me get down here. So in the X direction, I'm going to say, assuming I'm more or less in the X coordinate direction here, 45, 46, I'm going to do 46. So X direction, I'm on the left side, so that's negative. Negative 46. I don't think this lets me use decimals. I don't think it says here if I can use decimals or not. I'm going to not use decimals. All right, in the Y direction, let's see. It's almost lined up with that one. It's harder to tell. It's slightly in front, but not by much, and that's going to be harder to guess. I'm going to say 9. It's almost 10. I'm going to say 10 millimeters in front. That should be close enough for what we're doing right now. Since I'm not actually making a mesh, then I really just need a rough estimate. In front is also negative. So we're going to do -9. Oh, negative 10 I meant. It was like 9.5 or 9.8, something like that. It's hard to guess. That should be close though. Okay. And then there are extra features you can go through here. Custom E-step values. This looks like it's defined, but it's actually not. This is the value for it, but unless you uncomment those two, you're not doing E-steps. Now we just did our E-steps. I don't remember what they were. Wow, we just did them like last week, I think, or maybe earlier this week. And I thought there was something like 990, something like that. So we'll probably have to recalibrate our E-steps because we do have a non-stock size feeder on there. Remember, we changed that out. So I might go back to that. I don't think I wrote it down on anything handy here. Let's see. Let's see if I happen to write it down and keep it. I don't see it. Probably threw it away. You should probably keep those kind of things. I'll reset the E-steps later because I'm pretty sure they're wrong. We can do that from the screen though, or we could go back in here and custom reload the firmware. All this other stuff is stuff we don't have. So we're going to leave that alone. We are going to make sure that baby stepping is on, because we like that. So I'm going to do Control F, baby step. There we go. Well, that's the fine. We don't need the fine baby stepping. That's fine. All right, so they don't even put it in this part of the configuration. This one. This may be a reason alone to change out your firmware. Manual mesh leveling. So let's say you don't want to go pay the $50 for the BL Touch or the CR Touch. You don't want to buy that. You can use this. Uncomment this line. Define manual mesh leveling. And this will add a routine on your LCD screen. So over here on the screen where you can do all the probing with just the nozzle and tweaking the knob. That you can look at the documentation here on how to actually do that. I think I actually have a video of doing this. It might be on, no, that's Benchy's. Let's see, I think I have one. I don't know where I put it. I do have one. Maybe I can dig it up and find where I actually did that. There it is. That's manual mesh leveling. So you watch this if you don't want to read through the thing. And this is, you don't have any sensors. You do have to upload new firmware, but it will let you create that kind of map. That's kind of the map that you can, this is a visualization of the map. So this bed was kind of high on one corner and low on these others. Now this whole scale is, well, that's, I don't know, 0.5 millimeter or so. So there was a decent amount of distance. I don't remember if I intentionally did that so it would show up. I don't remember. But you can do this manually. You don't have to have a sensor. And it'll store that mesh in your printer's memory and reference it anytime you tell it to adjust for a warped bed. So you can do that manually. There is a power loss recovery. They do give you the warning here that how they do power loss recovery is they're continually writing to the SD card. Okay, I printed that line. I printed that line. I printed that line. And so it will wear out your SD card. SD cards are not infinite. They do have a limited number. Now it's a big number, but a limited number of read and write, or real write cycles, I guess. And so you will eventually burn up, I guess, your SD card. And the power loss recovery, the way it works, it will speed that process up. But if you want to add power loss recovery so that you're printing along, the power goes out, the printer shuts down, it will have written, the last thing I printed was line number whatever, and you can turn it back on, and it will, do you want to resume the print? And so you possibly could save a print that got shut down during a power loss situation. So that, yeah, there's the causes excessive wear on your SD card. ARC support, we'll deal with that later. And that's, so all we really had to do to get the CR Touch, well, it's not working yet, but hopefully it's going to work, is assign our probe offset. Where is the probe in relation to the nozzle? Oh, we need to turn it on though. Let's see. I don't think we ever enabled the custom probe. We did the custom probe. Yeah, we did right there. Okay. All of these we don't need. And then we selected our board. That should do it, I think. Let's make sure we didn't miss a probe. Probe with, The probe wizard, that could be handy. What that lets you do is the probe needs to know how far it is above, you know, when it triggers, how far is it above the surface, you know, but for how far is the nozzle above the surface when the probe triggers. So this wizard will help you figure that out without having to just go manually do it. I think I kind of remember something about this being a little bit buggy. So I might leave it alone. But I guess it won't, we can just ignore it if we don't want to use it, you know, we can just not use it. So I'll enable it and see how it works. Let's see if there's any other probe related things here. Oh, this is BL Touch. Here we go. There are two ways to connect the BL Touch. All on the 5-pin header, that's what we did, or using the 3-pin, which is the way it was before. If you want to use the BL Touch, uncomment the BL Touch line below. Now, and then go back to define that custom probe. So we do need to do this. Actually, we're using the 5-pin. So we're using the 5-pin header for the BL Touch connections. So we do that one. So we do need that. The BL Touch and the CR Touch, they're compatible enough that every time it says BL Touch, that can also mean CR Touch. This is an interesting one. For now, we're going to leave this at 0, linear advance. This actually, you've noticed blobs, maybe when you start a layer. Maybe you've printed the benchy and on the bottom of the hull, there's some random blobs. That's a layer start, like where they started a layer. You can actually mitigate that on a 32-bit board with this linear advance. It takes a lot of tuning and it's kind of finicky. Right now, setting it to 0 basically turns it off. But we could look at that later on too and try to tweak our prints to where we don't have those blobs at the beginning of a line. So you can definitely see it. I don't have that part anymore, but remember yesterday actually, the little rectangular part where the corners were blobby, we could probably clean those up a little bit with this also. All right, so that's all I want to change. There's a little check mark down here way at the bottom of the screen, like down here. You just click that. And now it's going to build this firmware with all the options that I've put in there. I got a bunch of warnings, that's fine. It sometimes, see, it's got to download a bunch of dependencies and all of that, that's fine. It installed a library, that's fine. This is not the firmware being installed. It is sometimes fails the first time for a variety of reasons. And all you do is you click the check mark box again. Sometimes you close VS Code, or you save, close VS Code, reopen, and then do it again. It's just sometimes that there's so many dependencies, like the code needs to have this other library and everything, and there's a lot that can happen in the wrong order. So hopefully ours compiles without any trouble on the first time. It does take a little bit of time to compile though, like several minutes. Maybe while it's compiling. Well, I did want to show you one thing. I've been using Thingiverse most of the time, but I've started using printables. So printables.com is like Thingiverse, but it has a couple of benefits. One, it's way faster. Thingiverse can get bogged down. Whoever wrote the database for Thingiverse is, I don't know, it got overwhelmed. It's really boggy. Slow down. So printables is much faster. The other thing, so this is a Prusa-based website. Thingiverse was MakerBot based. But you can actually earn filament by interacting with printables. So I've got 5 points right now. It takes, how much does it take to rewards? So once you get 350 points, you can get a roll of Prusa Mint PLA or PTG or ASA, you know, and the more points you get, the more stuff you can get. But you get points by, well, filling in your profile. Apparently I haven't done that. I get 20 points doing that. Publishing a model to printable. So you created a model, you put it on printables for people to download and print. You can get 10 points for that 10 times. Create a collection. So you just go through and find a couple of things and add them to a library that you want. That's how I got my 5 points, is I saved that little treasure box thing. Make something and print it. You can do that 10 times a month. So, and if you created some models that get downloaded, you get certain number of points for those things being downloaded. So they're trying to encourage interaction on this thing. I don't know how long this will last, because I could certainly see people abusing the system possibly. But for the time being, it's not that hard to think about. You could probably manage to get, you know, 350 points maybe once, and get you a free roll of filament. I don't know, you might have to pay shipping, maybe, I don't know. I haven't actually ever done it. So I've been using them. They have a lot of models. I printed this guy. I'm looking at our progress also. We're not finished compiling. I printed this guy. It's actually a really nice model. You don't have to have a Prusa printer to print these things. I printed it on the Ender 3 over here. And it's a little puzzle box thing. And it's came out really nice. And this is it over here. So I haven't glued it together yet, so I can't do it, but came out nice. Yeah, it's going to come apart on me. Let's see where we're at on our compiling. Still compiling. I wanted it to finish before 9:15. We're going to be cutting it close because there's one more thing we need to do. We need to actually put it on the printer. I guess I can get that started. I'm going to get the SD card out. It's the same process. The SD card, I'm going to put the firmware, once it's done, on the SD card. You just have to go find the firmware is all. So I have this firmware. I'm going to erase, oh, hold on. I'm going to erase this old one just so it doesn't accidentally get reinstalled, because I don't want it on there anymore. Yes, I want to erase that. All right. I was hoping I didn't mess up something over there. Let's see, we can erase these two. We don't, those were printing that box actually. So the way that your printer knows to install firmware is it looks for a file name. It does any kind of file name, but with the extension .bin, so like a binary file. Oh, look, we're getting somewhere. We succeeded. All right, so we've got this firmware succeeded. So to get the firmware, you go to, oh wow, I gotta remember where, .pio, build, and then this folder, right click on, so I was clicking those, I'm right clicking on this one and reveal in File Explorer. So it'll open up this window. There's that folder. There's the firmware. So as long as this firmware is a, look, it says well, let's see if I can get it to hover again. It says bin file, so that's the right kind of file. And as long as the printer doesn't already have firmware that's named firmware-2022-0616-090444, then it will install this as the new firmware. So it's looking for a bin file that has a new name on it. So I'm going to put that, well, hold on. Stay there. Let's see if I can get all these. I'm going to put that onto my SD card. So it's on the SD card now. Now there is a firmware that the printer has never seen before. Now it'll take any bin file. So you can have anything. It doesn't have to be firmware at all. Any kind of bin file. If it's got a name that it's not seen before, then it will install that as firmware. So you do have to be careful a little bit that you don't just put random bin files on your SD card. So we can close that. We're going to eject this guy. And then we're going to go back to our printer. And we're going to put our SD card in here. We're going to turn on the printer, and it should recognize that there is firmware. It did give me the blue screen, which means it's loading firmware. Either that or not booting up, so we'll see. Give it a few seconds to get this firmware installed. And there's our logo. So that is the TH3D logo. So we did install the new firmware. So that's good. And we've got 3 minutes to test it. All right, so once it gives me my screen, we will see if this works better than the previous one. So it looks okay. It says Easy Able Ready, which is it's talking about this guy. So let's just try to do an auto home. Actually, let's just move axis, X. All right, so there we go. That's better than what we had last time. Let's try to home. So when you're homing, you're relying on this sensor to do the Z. So be prepared for a shutdown if something doesn't work. In fact, I like to, when it drops the, oh. All right, so that is a little bit of issue. It did not deploy the probe. So what that means is it's not detecting this guy as my Z sensor. I'm going to auto home Z and just see. Yeah, it did the same thing. All right, so we're out of time, unfortunately, to troubleshoot this thing. But usually what is going on there is I've got a wire backwards somewhere. Let's see, what's going to be the easiest way to test this? I might need to go in and rearrange the order of some of these wires. You can take these out and rearrange them. It could be that. It could be on our remember in our firmware we did do the what was it called? The 5-pin. That was in BL Touch. Oh, wait, did I uncomment define custom probe? I did that, right? Let's make sure I actually did that. I may not have ever uncommented that line. I did the offsets. but I may not have done that. Custom E-steps. Yeah, custom probe is enabled, so we did define it. There's something in our firmware, yeah, there it is, that is not hooked up right. It could be we did the 5-pin, which we are using, but maybe that didn't, maybe we need to do BL Touch. That's not how we connected it up, according to what they said here. But I wonder if the, I won't be able to do this really quickly. Y'all will have to go. I will, I'll recompile this way and see if that, I also turn off, well, that shouldn't matter. I'll recompile it this way and see if that helps us at all. But it's going to take another 5 or whatever minutes to recompile. In the meantime, I'll do a little Google search here to see if I need to do a different option here for the CR Touch. It definitely says to do the 5-pin one here, but that didn't work. Let's see. Let's see. Well, these people, let's see what they say. There we go. Oh, they're using Clipper, so that's a different thing. That's the SKR mini board. V2. That one didn't even, so at least ours moved up and it didn't crash into the board, the bed. Yeah. They had to switch the black and white wires, which are the probe sensor, like it's acting as a sensor wires. That's not what I wanted to do. It's extremely easy to blow up your board when doing custom wiring. Nothing particularly useful there. Let's try and look at how the other one was wired up. So it was wired backwards though from what I have. I wonder if this can actually plug in both directions. It shouldn't be able to. Yeah, that just isn't gonna work. I guess let's see. CR Touch pinout. See if we can find. All right, that's how mine is wired, isn't it? I've got, yes, that's the, well, no, the blue and red are backwards on mine, according to that. Also, all right, so this could be the issue. I don't know. So in the picture, the picture on here, they show blue, red, and mine is red, blue. Although that shouldn't matter because those are just colors. Mine aren't flipped any differently here. So they've got the outer pin going to the outer pin here, which is out. I wonder, I mean, the wire color means nothing, really. The color is not at all important. But what is it supposed to be connected to? That's the question. I don't really want to, like, flip it around and short out something. That would be a shame. Although we are going to put a new board in it shortly. That one's a totally different set of colors. I have had to change these wires before, though. That's the thing. And looks like they had to do it here. All right. What's the worst that can happen? It blows up the board, right? All right, so to change these wires, there's these little, oh, we're covered up. I know we're going over time. Y'all can just go if you get tired of this. To change these wires, there's a little metal probe right here that you push in and you pull the wire out. So you need a super tiny something, maybe this, and you gotta be able to grab this wire and push that tab down. I'm sure there's a tool that does this too. And we'll have to do it on the table so you won't necessarily be able to see. I don't have such a tool though that I know of. All right, there's that one. I guess I could blow up the sensor too. That's possible if I wired it backwards. All right, so you take those guys out and then you just push them back in the way you want them. I don't know that I want them this way, but that's what we're going to do. Okay, and then you can plug this guy back in and check for bad things happening. It did power on, so that's good. I haven't, the firmware is still the same. I haven't changed the firmware. So this is the same firmware that we had before. All right. Let's see. Motion. Just auto home. We're still homing in X. We didn't change anything with X, so that's fine. Home to Y. It's no different here. So that didn't fix our problem, but it didn't deploy the probe. So there's still something there that's still not cooperating. What else? Like, I don't know what the CR touch, that's the BO touch there. I'm looking at this. I want to see the pin out for the CR touch, which I see pin outs for BL touch, but I don't see any actual pin outs, like what pin is doing what on here. Well, I can at least match up there, I guess, but that doesn't really tell me what the pins are doing. But what they're showing is that if I look at this from the label side, which is that way, then this wire should go to, which it is doing that, that's what it's doing. And then they should be in order from there, which would flip the red and blue back the way it was. But I want to see actual pin out. Maybe they don't have that where you can see it. Hmm. What's weird about it to me is that on the BL Touch, the wires that were here, the wires that were these three were not. They were basically the ones over here. That's the weirdness to me. Wow, that's. Should I do that? I don't know. None of the others show that being wired up that way. But looking at the board, I've got G and V, which I think would be ground and voltage. And then I've got an in and another ground and an output. I always thought the yellow wire was the output wire, but maybe it's not. The black and white are the sensor part, like it's working like a switch, which G and V, okay, that kind of makes sense that maybe that's what it is. N, oh no, N is yellow. That does make sense. Out, I don't know which one would make sense as the output because you can't see it on the little sensor here. That is one thing I like about the BO Touch is that you can actually see the connector and they actually have the pin out, not on the touch, but you can go look it up, where I can't see the pin out for this guy, and I assume it's not in any of their little documents. No. I don't know how much longer I will sit and fiddle with this as the stream goes on. I think my firmware did compile over here, so might as well try that. Although now I've got to put the red and blue wires back the way they were, I think. All right. So let's just look at this and see. So here's the no, not there. Here's the firmware that is currently running on there. Now I have created a new firmware. This is the one where I switch from the 5-pin to the 3+2 pin, which I don't think is going to work. But let's try it out and see. Okay, and you should be able to notice, let's see. The new firmware, the one I just did, has a slightly different number. Basically, it's got the time is different. So I drug that over to my SD card. The printer should recognize, hey, here's a new one I've never seen before. I'm going to install this now. So it should install this one. If I want to go back to the other one, then I need to change this number, somehow to add anything to it. And I can flip back to that other one. But I don't know. Let's try this and see if that helps us. I don't think it will, though. If this doesn't solve it, then I'll work on it and figure out what was going on and report back on Monday. Do I want to switch these pins back? Let's switch the pins back to the way they were, because that is the way it came, and so let's do it that way. If I can get them out of there. There's the blue. There's the red. So the blue was in the middle, or towards the middle. The red was on the side. Plug that back in. I actually think I probably can get it to work this way by wiring the black and white wires into the Z in-stop pin. That'll just require finding the right plug and everything. Kind of like what I had before. Like where I had kind of made this thing. All right, let's see what happens. So this is the CR Touch with the 3-pin option, but I've got it plugged into the 5-pin port. So let's see. There's X, there's Y. No luck there. So I've got to figure out which combination of wires to plug into what. I'll work on that, and I'll tell you what I did to fix it on Monday. All right, because otherwise it's going to go on forever. So, or a long time, potentially. All right, so sorry that didn't get actually all the way installed. It got installed, but not working completely. But we'll figure out what the issue is and come back on Monday and tell you what I did. All right, I'll see you on Monday.